feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun. Open wide for some soccer!
I don't care what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the Cowboys.
Call this college rule!
Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm Chris. This is Dom. We're just a couple of comics, like talking sports, hanging out. Please give our YouTube a like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. We're always recording right here, Ingle Studio, right here in Tucson. And we're back on the hardwood today. We're back in the court.
We're back on the court. Someone who can part the Red Sea in the paint,
nice.
if you know what I'm talking about, Chris. Who do we got?
Talking about the religious Lord Moses. No, I'm just kidding. We're talking about Moses Malone, the chairman of the boards, which actually is one of the best nicknames. We were talking about it.
They just don't make them.
They just don't make them like that
anymore.
That's
nicknames. Right. Getting into it, Moses Eugene Malone, born March 23rd, 1955 in Petersburg, Virginia. Tons of guys come from this area, like this state alone. Tons of good big men. Ralph Sampson, David Robinson. You know, like this is one of the many, I guess.
Yeah. I'll say this, though, which is rare for athletes. For whatever reason, he is an only child.
I was like, really?
Because it's almost always the younger brother or the
oldest one, like the one carrying, or the middle one just filled with spite.
Yes.
You know, it's very rarely. Oh, you know who was an only child basketball player that we did that I remember? Grant Hill.
Oh, yeah, Grant Hill was.
He said he was like, my parents were only children. I was an only child. Okay, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That might be the only two, because it almost always is, well, one of three kids. And you're like, okay.
He was the only child to Mary, who dropped out of school in the 5th grade. At the age of 2, his mom kicked his alcoholic dad out.
Yep.
So, I mean, it was just him and his mom growing up, and the community said the only book at home was a Bible.
Mm-hmm.
He helped his mom with money growing up and the income by shining shoes and selling papers, but spent most of his free time playing basketball, and why not? He was a tall dude.
He was very tall and lanky. That's what you don't... I never would have thought that with how he is, like, as an NBA player, but he is very, like, thin.
Yeah, like 6'10", 6'11" eventually, but it's like, it needs to fill out.
Yep.
It needs to definitely fill out. Just dominates, though, due to his height.
Yeah, in Virginia.
In Virginia at Petersburg High, star for the Crimson Wave.
Yep, I love that.
It's like a mix. It's like if Alabama and Tulane's mascots had a baby. What was it? Oh my God! I wonder if the schools in the conference had similar nicknames. Like there was a blue wave, an orange wave, a yellow wave.
I was thinking more like period names. Like one of them's Aunt Flo,
Aunt Flo.
and then the Crimson. I'm writing the Crimson Wave right now.
The red cream sodas.
Exactly.
So.
But yeah, dominant in high school. His high school team actually won 50 games and were back-to-back state champs.
So he's obviously getting noticed. Virginia's a very basketball hip. Allen Iverson is from
another
there. Guy from there. So college interest in him, of course,
is huge.
Signs a letter of intent to play for Maryland and Lefty Driesell, but school isn't necessarily Moses' favorite thing to do. And I can't blame him, but this is an era where if you're great in high school, you have to go to college and be a student athlete.
And then the ABA comes in, and this is the first time that they do this. They literally are like, why don't we just pick them straight from high school?
Yeah, if they're good enough. And they want to, because they were the only ones taking underclassmen,
I know.
too.
They were poor. And they were just like, hey, we'll sign you for a deal for $1 million.
Jackie Moon needs to fund his music career.
That's right.
And the Flint Tropics.
That's right.
So they offer him $1 million, 5-year contract, and where does he go, Chris?
Well, he goes to the Utah Stars.
Where they don't allow music.
I was just going to say, no, they don't allow astrology.
Stars, they're the work of the devil.
But could you imagine getting that offer growing up poor, and then they're like, well, you can go to Maryland and you can be a basketball star, or you could go to the Utah Stars and make $1 million over. Like, I bet that number was so.
You can play in the ACC in some places that are just fresh off of segregation and make no money. Or, granted, it is still Utah, make $1 million.
Exactly.
To play basketball.
Yes.
Like, come on. What are you going to do after getting picked in the third round of the 74 draft?
But like what I said, when he joins Utah, he's 6'10", 6'11". I know that this is my favorite thing about basketball is the heights are always like,
yeah.
maybe.
You know? Like the Olajuwon one where it's like, they never come from Africa being 7 feet. And then it's like, oh my God, come on, get a cab.
Dude, the USA team is playing in the Olympics right now, and they had their starting 5, and somebody went through the heights that they're listed at, and they were just like, Kevin Durant is 2 inches taller than a guy that says he's 2 inches tall. Like, Kevin Durant's listed at 6'10", this other guy's listed at 7'1", and he's literally like 2 inches taller than that guy, and you're just like, oh, they never say the real height.
No.
So he's 6'10", 6'11", but he's 215", and
that's rail thin,
and for that
height.
size, yes. And that's what they said was they didn't think he had the body type to like really be an NBA, because this is back when the NBA centers
you could physically assault people,
exactly,
like in the
exactly.
paint. Like it was not only legal, it was kind of encouraged.
Like, clotheslines were encouraged if you hit them off the ropes.
Exactly.
But so
I do want to say how momentous this is, because this is before, and we'll talk about him later in this episode, Chocolate Thunder, comes up at a high school.
Very true.
This is before, because you have
this is the first class of it.
Yeah, but you have that gap until Garnett and Kobe where guys weren't taking these chances.
No, they weren't taking.
And this is what I always liked about Moses Malone researching other. He bets on himself a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And kudos to him for having the foresight. But he gets to Utah, and the media and him they mix like oil and vinegar.
Well, and we were talking about this before the podcast. He's 18, maybe 19, fresh from high school. They don't really prep their stars.
No.
And the media is very harsh, and he's not very well spoken at this time. So he really gets a lot of like and he said this himself. He was like, it just felt like they were talking down to me constantly.
Well, I mean, this is Utah. And
exactly.
when someone who is a bit country from Virginia comes out, and the Mormon community, we've never seen anything like this.
Exactly.
Person,
so he really did not like the media in Utah. And I mean, they folded like the next season. So.
Yeah, no.
This is very ABA to see him bounce around.
He's an all-star.
Yeah, he's an all-star.
He's all rookie.
Yep,
that
first year.
He's playing against grown men. And like I said, and granted, being a front court player in the 90s was a very arduous task. But Garnett's not even entering this era where you can be like decapitated.
Yes.
He has a leg injury the following year in 75-76. Like you said, the Stars fold. And then he goes to the Spirits of St. Louis. Aren't even a team. But at the end of the season, after averaging about 15 and 10, they're sold to pay the debts.
We get a merger.
That's right, because paying their debts sounds men of their timey as far as selling people.
But when we look at what happens with his contract and all that stuff, it is such a weird, because in 75 or in 76, I think it might have been, he actually gets drafted in the NBA by the New Orleans Jazz.
Yes.
But they essentially make that null and void.
Well, they wanted to get their first round pick back for the deal they made with the Lakers for Gail Goodrich. So he goes back in. And
he goes back into the draft again now in 78, I think.
77. 76, 77.
And then gets drafted by Portland.
And, oh boy.
Could you imagine? And
to me, this is why their franchise is forever. I won't say it's a curse, but they're thinking, oh, we have great front court players.
Which they did,
but some deadhead Chiba smoking idiot who ruins Pac-12 broadcast games and Bill Walton.
We're pro Bill Walton on this cast.
I'm just saying his body breaks.
But that's the thing, is they felt like they had enough front court. They literally said they were going to draft Moses Malone to trade him for whatever.
Yeah.
And they do that.
And they trade him to the Buffalo Braves for the 76-77 season for a first-round pick in 78. $232,000, but he only plays in 2 games for him.
And this is the other thing that I find ridiculous is, and I imagine that there was a bit of disrespect from guys coming from the ABA where they were like, well, you're still a kid. We're not whatever, because the Buffalo Braves literally told him that he couldn't be their starter. Like they were arguing over playing time for their.
And that franchise was fledgling. They became the fucking Clippers.
Yep.
That's who ended up becoming the Clippers. So he's traded to the Houston Rockets for 2 first-round picks. And at 21 and 76-77, he's just 13-13 as far as points and boards. 437 rebounds, sets an NBA record. He's 21 years old.
Yep.
2.2 blocks a game. And they beat Washington that year, Wes Unseld, in the playoffs. He has 15 offensive rebounds in their overtime win in the deciding game, which was an NBA playoff record. And they end up losing to the Sixers in the Eastern Conference Finals. But you're like,
this is
Houston, you have a star now.
Yep.
Because they used to be San Diego and Denver in the ABA. Like, this is a new thing for this franchise. 77-78 makes I believe, his first All-Star game in the NBA. Sets a new NBA record for rebounds.
Yep. Well, that's what they said was he was what you would think of like a Dennis Rodman complete player. Do you know what I mean? Like he really was the rebound champ multiple years, but he would also put up like 30 points.
Yeah,
a game.
like he's an offensive force
yes.
too. That year he's 19 points a game. He misses the final 23 games though because he has a stress fracture in his right foot, and as we talked about with a lot of these big guys, sometimes it's just that, like with the Yao Ming one.
Yep.
Especially
it's just then it's really a stress where you're just like, well, that's you on your feet all day.
Well, you're very tall.
Yeah, next season
he starts harvesting.
Yep, because he's putting on weight and now he's starting to harvest. He's cultivating it, but he really becomes the offensive threat that is almost like unbeatable, where you're just like, he's MVP this year. He has one game against, I think it was the Jazz, New Orleans at the time, where he had 37 rebounds. Could you even imagine? He almost pretty much got every missed shot.
Some teams in this era weren't shooting it 37 times a game.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's crazy.
Leads the league in rebounds, like you had said. They do lose to the Hawks in
the playoffs
postseason, but like he's a bona fide star now.
Yeah,
like not just in Houston. His final 3 seasons in Houston are pretty awesome, and this is the time we mentioned our Olajuwon episode. He's starting to mentor him in the offseason. Remember we talked about how it's like, you're tall and you're an athlete, but I'm going to teach you how to play in the front court in the NBA.
Well, this is before Hakeem had even gone pro.
He was in
University of Houston. And I saw, because it's him, the other forward is actually Rudy Tomjanovich, who becomes Hakeem's coach.
Yep.
So that's what all 3 of them really work, and they said this, like, worked together to make Hakeem the best.
So in 79-80, he's an all-star. All-star of these next 3 seasons in a row.
Yeah, he's
averages almost 26 and 14.5 rebounds a game. He had 37 and 20 in a winner-go-home game in the playoffs against the Spurs that year. They lost in the Eastern semis to the Celtics. 80-81, second in scoring. Do you know who he finished second to?
Dantley.
Yep, guy we did the episode on. All right, 28.8 a game, leading the league in rebounds as an all-star.
Well, that's the other thing is you look at the record of points with the rebounds, where you're just like, oh, he's ripping 15 rebounds, and he's second scoring leader.
He's chairman of the boards who can set a meeting anytime he wants.
And this is what we'll get into later. Barkley said he was the best offensive rebounder he's ever seen in his life, because he missed so many shots that he knew where they were going to go, because they used to fuck with each other all the time.
Oh, yeah, no.
And he literally would say that. He was just like, oh, he'd throw up some of the worst shots.
And Moses is like, hey, don't eat 3 pizzas for dinner. You know? But Western Conference Finals that year in the deciding game against the Kansas City Kings.
Yep.
Not even playing there anymore. 36-11, and then they play the Celtics in the 81 Finals. Does great. I mean, has a fantastic series, 22-15-2 for blocks.
But they lose.
They lose, obviously.
I did think it was funny because this is when the teams were like getting into their divisions.
Yeah.
So they lose to the Celtics in the semifinals, and then the Celtics gets put into the East. Yeah. So they end up losing to the Celtics in the finals.
Exactly.
Where you're just like, oh, all right, well,
it's like the NFL when they used to have, we talked about in our Dome Patrol.
Yeah.
New Orleans and Atlanta are playing in the NFC West.
Exactly.
Like, come on.
81-82, he's
31.1 points a game.
Might be his best season, but we'll talk about the 76er season. But he really is the only player on this team that's like a superstar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Second in scoring.
Yep.
Wins the second MVP, like you said. Leads the league in rebounds. Leads in offensive rebounds. Leads the league in minutes played, too. That
too.
was the other thing is.
As a big man.
Excluding that 1 year with the foot injury.
Yep.
When he's in his prime, he's logging those minutes. There's no load management. You're sending him out there to, be a Windex man.
To play 80 games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it really is, yeah.
All-NBA first team. He had a career-high 53 against the Clippers there on February 2nd. And then set a new league record for offensive rebounds about a week and a half later against the Sonics. They end up losing the playoffs to the Sonics in 3 games, but he's a free agent by 82-83.
Which just has to be bad. Just to think about the Rockets where you're like, okay, so this guy was MVP 2 out of the last 4 seasons.
Okay.
And then they were like, you know what? We're just going to let him go for nothing.
So can I tell you something about the next 2 drafts with the Rockets, though?
Well,
they get Sampson.
And then
they get Olajuwon.
I know, but still, could you imagine them sign and deal? Which they just don't do. It just wasn't really
that wasn't
thought.
A thing in those, which is kind of. It's great that they invented it now.
Yes.
I mean, because you can do some pretty creative things with their roster. So 82-83 is a restricted free agent. And this team that he goes to really needs him because what they've been figuring out in the playoffs is we're running into Roger Murdoch, the co-pilot in the Lakers. And Chocolate Thunder Dawkins is spending too much time with Juicy Lucy, Chris.
I was just going to say, they had to make this move where it's such a crazy thing to say, but they literally move one of the best centers for another. You know what I mean? Where it's
Chocolate Thunder when in his prime was good, but Moses Malone is the guy that you need.
And Moses is in his prime.
Yeah, so he goes to the Sixers. 6 years, $13.2 million on September 2nd, 1982. Actually, what happens is the Rockets owners basically say he's not in our future plans.
Yeah.
So they trade him for a first rounder and Caldwell Jones, another front court player who just wasn't getting it done against Kareem.
They had new owners. So in that off season or whatever, that last season, they had new owners, and the new owners looked at his contract as $2 million annually, and they were just like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Which you like,
can't be new owners going like, let's start slashing payroll. I mean, you can slash the dead weight, but you got to spend
you're
money.
MVP.
And it's your best player. Yeah. I don't know if they paid attention in business school.
No. That wasn't a thing for the Rockets back then.
But if you're the Sixers,
oh my God,
they're loaded. You got Dr. J, you got Mo Cheeks, Andrew Toney, Bobby. I mean, this a great team in 82-83.
I think I've said this before. Mo Cheeks is my favorite basketball name.
Oh, easy. Mm-hmm. Mo Cheeks. Mo Money, Mo Cheeks.
Mo Money, Mo Cheeks.
Mo Problems. Leads the NBA that year with 15.3 rebounds and 24.5 points. Also has 24.5 points a game.
MVP.
Again.
The only
MVP, God, 3 of them.
The only professional athlete outside of Barry Bonds to win back-to-back MVPs in 2 different teams.
I saw that stat. That was great.
That stat I love so much. Where I was just like, oh yeah, Moses Malone was that great in this era of his prime, where he's just like 77 or whatever to
Oh, yeah.
88.
His head coach, Billy Cunningham, in a great quote, he said, let's not make believe. The difference from last year was Moses. Mm-hmm. Like that, I mean, but that's why you do a sign and trade like that.
Yeah.
Honestly. Before the playoffs, it's his most famous prediction.
Oh, it's the best.
Do you want to get into it, Chris?
He literally says that they're going to win it faux. So it's F-O, F. I'm not trying to, not...
No, it's faux because he had
They're
that
gonna
draw.
win. I know, because they're gonna win they're gonna sweep every single game because they were that dominant, and then they proceed to do faux.
So they sweep the Knicks. Then they go up 3-0 on the Bucks. And
then
lose in game 4.
Yep.
They end up beating them in 5. And then they go to the finals against the Lakers.
And sweep them.
That had to be really satisfying,
Oh,
especially
my
for
God.
guys like Irving and Cheeks, just to be like that close that many times and lose to them.
Well, and Moses, who played them.
The Celtics too,
Yeah.
obviously, but yeah. Played them in Houston. I don't know if you saw in their championship rings inside it says faux, 5, faux.
Yep. It's so good.
So his next 3 seasons in Philly, mind you, they have a great team. It's just they're competing with Boston and Detroit.
And then next season he has an ankle injury.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they were saying was it wasn't like when he came in from Houston, everybody was not injured. And then the next season he gets an ankle injury. He has limited time. They end up losing to the Nets in the first round, which is horrible.
They lost to, I think, the Celtics in one of these, and then the
Yeah.
Bucks.
And then,
It sucks though because he's an all-star all 3 years.
Oh yeah.
He's averaging almost 24 and 13 a game. It's just now we get into the era where he's mentoring guys.
Yeah. So Charles Barkley comes in.
Charles Barkley comes in '84 and talks about how he helps him lose weight.
Well, he said the first time he met him, Charles was like walking into practice, and somebody goes, "Hey, fathead," and Charles just keeps walking because he's like, "No way, nobody's talking to me." And Moses says it again, and Charles is like, "You talking to me?" He just goes, "Yeah. Look at you. You're 300 pounds." And he was. When he came to the 76ers, he was huge. And what?
It's like when Dennis is talking to Frank about being a model.
Oh, my God.
Look at you.
Look at you. You disgust me.
You disgust everyone.
Yep. Well, what Moses got Charles to understand, because Charles just said, "Dude, I would just overpower people with like my skill." And then Moses was just like, no, this is the NBA. You have to work hard. Everybody here
has skill.
Is skilled. You have to. And then he literally dropped, I think they said 50 pounds. So he went from like 300 to like 255, where you're like, oh, yeah, that was like crazy.
The round mound of rebound.
Man. And he taught him to rebound. That was the other thing that he said. He was like really instilled rebounding.
Hey, fathead, your ass is wider than mine. Use it to your advantage.
Yep.
That's like something a second grader would call someone as an insult. Like, hey, fathead, get off the 4-square court.
Yep. He also said, because Barkley was kind of talking about him, he was just like, he was into boxing out, but he hated the concept of boxing out and not getting a rebound. He was just like, what are you doing? Get the ball.
Be 6'10". Okay. So June 16th, 1986, though, he's traded to the Washington Bullets. With Terry Catledge, an 86 first-round pick, an 88 first-round pick for Cliff Robinson and Jeff Ruland, I believe. And does pretty well for the Bullets. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's his 10th straight All-Star game, 24 and just over 11.
He's an All-Star for the Bullets every year that he's there.
Yeah. April 12th, 86, I did want to add, though, he had his 20,000th point.
Yep.
Which... considering for a guy who's known as the chairman of the boards, he'd at least put it back in the net.
Yep.
Swept by the Pistons in round 1 that year. 87-88, 11th straight All-Star game, 55 double-doubles. Mm-hmm. How old is he at this point?
They said that, and I don't know if it was this year, but he went on a streak of 20 and 10 of like 25 in a row.
Oh my
where you're
God.
just like, that's the only thing I want from a center. Like, I don't, you know what I mean?
It's like when we did Tim Duncan, essentially.
Yes.
Like the same type of
And
thing.
Moses would have been probably a power forward now.
Yes.
But like just this era, he was one of the best centers.
You're not messing with him.
No.
I don't know. 88-89, he joins Atlanta on a 3-year deal. These were the good Hawks teams with Dominique Wilkins.
This is with Dominique.
Signs a 3-year deal August 16th, 1988. 20 and 10. And you know what? He's the only guy who's ever done this with 4 teams.
Oh,
4
yes.
different teams. I had read that. All-Star game for the 12th and final time. End up losing in the first round of the Bucks, though, in the playoffs. And,
this next year is when he becomes a bench player.
he becomes a bench player, but he's starting to crossed a lot of different milestones.
Yes.
Which is,
But I was going to say, when I saw that, he's still, because like you have that sixth man that's still unbelievably productive for the amount of time. So he was still averaging, I think, like 9.8 and like 7, where you're just like, oh, that's perfect from your backup.
November 3rd, 1990, he's the NBA leader in free throws made. Breaks Oscar Robertson's record. 25,000 points, November 21st, 1990, and has his 15,000th career rebound, March 15th, 1991.
I'll tell you the stat that got me.
I think I know exactly where you're going with
because I figured you would. Was he beat Kareem's? I think it was Kareem.
No, it was Wilt.
Was it Wilt?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it was Wilt. Yeah, because it had to be Wilt. But he beat Wilt's record of most consecutive games without fouling out as a center.
I know. It's in this era.
So he had 1,046 consecutive games without fouling out, which you're just like, that milestone might be like one of the bigger ones where you're like, because he got to stay in so many games.
And that was the other thing. It's not like he's one of those front court players who will jump out to the wing, who won't be in the paint, who won't rebound. He's at least in the vicinity of the ball every possession.
Yes, he's in the middle. He's in the muck every possession, and didn't have one slip up.
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean? Because this is 9-10 seasons consecutive,
right? Where he's just like, oh my gosh, it's incredible. That year they end up losing in first round of the playoffs to the Pistons, and in 1991 he signs with the Bucks for 2 years and $3.6 million. He's starting for a bad team, but I mean he's still playing consistently.
Yes. A little injury problem, but he's
issues with his back.
Yeah. He's playing so far at this point.
Misses most of 92 and 93. Comes back to the Sixers, though, 93, 94.
I like that.
He comes to tutor another front court player for the Sixers.
Sean Bradley.
Who
is paraplegic now.
He is. Very sad.
I was going to say, I brought that up to a comic friend of ours, and he goes, no way. And I was like, look it up.
It was like a bike accident. It was freaky.
That's why I brought it up, because it was Jordan who rides bikes.
Shit.
And he was, because he got hit on a bike or whatever and like broke his back. And I was like, oh man, it's just like Sean Bradley. And he goes, the basketball player? And I was like, yes.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
The actor? That's still one of my favorite lines of any movie.
Oh, Back to the Future.
So he really is this backup, and then he goes and backs up David Robinson at the Spurs. I really thought, looking at the way this goes, I really thought Houston should have came in and tried to get him.
I know, right?
But hey.
But at that point, though, I don't think Hakeem needs him. At that stage.
That's true. Hakeem was dominating.
Yeah, so did you see his last game for San Antonio where they're playing Charlotte? He made a 74-foot bomb three-pointer.
Oh, I saw that.
As the time expired. But he was an absolute... The thing with him is you didn't really find a lot on him because, his relationship with the media was kind of tenuous.
We touched on this early on, that they kind of were like making fun of him early on, and from that he literally was just always very guarded with the NBA or with the media. But the players that played with him were constantly like, oh, he would mess with us, and he was so fun all the time. But with the media, he was very just like straightforward, just like, no, yes, okay,
foul.
That is one of the best, and because they knew how good they were. That's the other thing that I love, where they were like, oh yeah, we could win every single game against the Lakers too.
Oh, exactly. Not win every. You just sweep them. Just make them look bad. Just a junkyard dog in the paint. Just an absolute badass. They had this great quote where one of the Rockets assistants told him to improve his passing, and all he said was, "They ain't paying me to pass."
Yep.
He has the most combined ABA and NBA rebounds. 9 times led the league in offensive rebounds. 28,000. God, just 1 out of 3 players with 28,000 points, 17,000 rebounds, and only 1 of 8 with 3 or more MVPs.
Yeah.
And yet he's not brought up
as much as he should be.
His prime was like right before and like during the beginning of Magic Bird.
I was just going to say, right before the TV almost exploded it with that rivalry where his 76ers team almost gets swept under the rug, even though all they did was sweep.
Oh, they did.
You know what
win.
I mean?
Yeah.
That's the kind of shit where you're just like, oh yeah, that team was the best team by far in the whole NBA, and they don't really get talked about.
No, had his number retired by both the Rockets and the 76ers. Hall of Famer in 2001.
First ballot, which, I mean, obviously, he was so good.
They built him a statue in Philly, Bill Burr. You don't have one of Joe Frazier. Well, they do have one of Moses Malone.
They do have one of Moses Malone.
12-time All-Star, 50th and 75th anniversary teams, 3-time MVP, as we said, NBA title. He was a Finals MVP that year.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was when he went back-to-back MVPs and had the Finals MVP. So if you're debating whether or not he was the best player, you're just like, yep, that was good.
Yeah, but what I did want to bring up is, post when he goes to Washington towards the end of his career, because that's like 7 or 8 years, right? Mm-hmm. He still finished his career 20.6 points a game, 12.2 rebounds, and 1.3 blocks. So I wish, you can go back and take that chunk of his career from Houston and Philadelphia where it's just like, that's preposterous.
Yep.
It's amazing how dominant he was.
Because he really was putting up like 25, 15, whatever his I looked at his averages for some of those years, and you're just, and over 2 blocks.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
A couple of years, he should have won scoring titles.
Yes, outside of Dantley.
Dantley.
And Garvin, I think, was the other one.
Oh, yeah, George Gervin, yeah.
Gervin, yeah. Where you're just like, oh, yeah, those guys did just,
all
they were
did
black
shoot.
holes for.
Yeah.
All right, calm down. They were very shoot heavy, and he was very team based, even in Houston when he was like the focal point. But going to the 76ers, you were just like, oh, this team is so dominant.
This team is loaded, just absolutely loaded. Moses isn't with us though anymore.
No,
kind of unfortunate.
Died in 15.
Yep, heart disease.
Yeah,
at a hotel. He was doing a charity golf tournament, which it did live longer than some of the other people that we've done, but still tragic to see somebody go like that.
Yep.
Just stud.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the best NBA players ever that never gets talked about that. You know what I mean? Like,
I would a good topic because it's like, he was really good, wasn't he?
Yes.
Like, God.
I wouldn't put him as like a top 3 center, but I would put him as like a top 5. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I would put him 4th almost every single time where you're just like, all right.
Yeah, He's probably top 20 NBA player.
Yes.
Top 25.
Exactly.
Like, easy, just any position.
Any position.
Yeah.
All right.
Dominant.
Thanks, guys.
Malone.
Moses.